Another night of the Odo festival celebrated. The patriarch finished telling a story to Dagon as he fell asleep, and the patriarch moved on to visit Princess River, his adopted daughter. Before he makes it to the young girl's room, he is stopped by General Twist. Even in the palace, with her weapons removed, she would have intimidated most people just by her stance. Her tone was clear. She was willing to draw blood to get what she wanted. "Who are you, and how did you replace my husband?" she asked the man who was pretending to be the patriarch. Her senses told her that he was the patriarch. However, she wouldn't have survived leading her nation as long as she did without observing people around her. She remembered how she saw her own father drinking his tea a little differently, and it was enough to tell her that her father was planning to assassinate her, so she killed him before he had a chance to kill her. If that clue from her dad was a whisper, then the patriarch's behavior was the roar of the ocean. He smiled too often. He said please and thank you. He gave gifts for no reason, and he didn't simply throw out coins across the streets. He gave the guildie to the beggars by hand. He was not the man who led the armies of Cybele across Stromer. He was not the man whom she married to secure an alliance. Whatever he was an impostor, and she would give him one chance to explain himself. Because whatever he actually was, he was something worth allying with to gain power. Anne looked mystified for a moment before he opened his mouth to explain, and then stopped. Then something changed, like a glamour was removed. Something she thought that only the Aziza could do. Except Twist was certain that the Aziza couldn't glamour this thoroughly. The man before her was not a man. She was a very young girl who reminded Twist of her younger sister. The same guilt filled her eyes, the same crooked smile, except Twist had never seen a hat like that before, and she certainly never saw a dress in those colors and stripes. That would have been impossible for even the best dyers on Stromer. "What are you?" Twist asked again as she approached the girl. The girl opened her mouth to answer when Twist simply stepped forward, grabbing the girl's head, and she twisted the girl's head around. A quick way to kill, in her opinion. A lot of people like to believe it was an instant form of death, but in her experience, it usually meant paralysis and suffocation, long enough to watch them suffer, maybe paralyzed enough to not even move their eyes, but she could still see that spark in their eyes and watch it get snuffed out. It was like her childhood joy of suffocating rats all over again, except rats don't understand mercy, revenge, anger, or any real emotion. Watching those emotions over her victim's eyes helped her feel alive when so much in her life felt bland and boring. Except there was something wrong in this little girl's eyes. Even though she looked like Fletcher, Twist drew no joy from this death. It was boring, it was bloodless, and looking into the girl's glassy eyes, she saw no spark being snuffed out. She would have thought the girl a doll, if not for the fact her eyes still shimmered with life, and she smiled before she spoke, which should not have been possible with a broken spine and head twisted around. "I am a little girl who wanted the world to be fair. Then I grew up and saw the world wasn't fair. Know what I did then?" she asked General Twist, who grabbed the body and threw it out of a nearby palace window, certain that whatever trouble the body of a young girl would stir up was worth freeing herself from the trouble of this demon. Instead, the little girl's voice echoed across the halls, coming from one of the doorways that was still open. A flickering light that could be seen inside. The voice echoed through the halls and through Twist's mind. "I decided to make the world fair. And you know what, little Miss Twist? I am making the world fair. The voice echoed as Twist ran into the room to find a way to end her torment. As she pushed open the door and she froze when she saw what was inside. Inside, resting on in her bed, was young Princess River, her eyes drooping, not even somehow not even noticing the sudden intrusion. A single candle lit her room while on a chair next to her bed was the same young girl that Twist just threw out of the palace window. She was whole and fine, and she was reading from a storybook to the young princess, an act the patriarch would have never done. And yet this demon girl would presume to sit in the presence of royalty. Twist wanted to speak, to say something, but no noise came out. So Twist found herself frozen with fear as the demon girl finished the story. And the father told his child, "But if you ever need a reminder of how loved you are, just look in the mirror and you'll see me smiling back at you." The girl finished as she blew out the candle, leaving Twist alone in the darkness, and she heard the demon girl's whisper behind her in her ear. "If you're brave, you may seek me out tomorrow night, but tonight you'll harm no one." And Twist was finally able to scream as she shot up straight in her bed, at first thinking it was an impossible dream, until she saw the demon girl at the foot of her bed. Somehow this young girl loomed over Twist. Her twisted, shadowy limbs pressed Twist's chest down to the bed, leaving just enough for her to barely breathe, as she felt herself suffocate underneath the demon girl's hold, as the girl leaned in close to whisper to Twist, "I won't let you hurt her. I hope you have a chance to reflect." The girl whispered, as her breathing could be heard in both of Twist's ears, as she helplessly looked up at the demon girl's shining eyes in the darkness, as she struggled to breathe, making the breath in her ears far more cruel to her. The Odo Festival opened most of the city at night as people danced in the streets. Mansa walked past revelers as he watched the masked Odo get closer and closer to the dancers and revelers. Mansa did not know what they were doing, since they never actually touched anyone, and no one noticed the Odo. Anyone who walked where the Odo were standing simply walked through the spirits. Except when Mansa came close. When he came close to the spirits, they parted away from him, careful not to let him touch them, and also careful not to touch him. There was something about him that allowed him to see them, but it also marked him as some kind of threat to them. He knew that the touch had to be a threat to them, because many of the Odo were once people. If Mansa was only a curiosity, he would have had Odo trying to touch him, talk with him, or try to hurt him. Since they weren't trying to approach him, but they still watched him, that meant he was a threat in addition to something interesting. He knew to not give his name out to them, but still worried that there was more he wasn't seeing with these masked ghosts. The streets near the harbor were full of drunks, a lot of them sailors, but not all of them. Mansa passed by the Temple of the Sea, one he let Fletcher manage, and it was with no small amount of pride that he saw there were still guards outside of the temple, keeping the drunks out of the temple. The old shrine of Olokun, from Mason's day, felt too small for a god, according to Mansa's sensibilities. Fletcher was managing it quite well, keeping out the undesirables who tended to congregate around the harbor and the docks. By the time Mansa made it to the harbor, it was near the witching hour, and even the hardiest of drunks had passed out in each other's arms, and even his eyes drooped heavily as he looked around the docks, hoping to find Olokun somewhere near the docks and boats. He didn't even remember passing out, but he did remember waking up when someone threw a bucket of seawater on him, and he woke up coughing and spitting at whoever threw the water at him, only to then realize if he had seawater thrown at him, then he might have been cleansed of his curse. He woke up to examine his arms, and indeed he was still covered in wet blood. The sea water in the bucket did not cleanse him of the blood. He glanced up at the person who threw the bucket at him, and he saw the figure in the fisher's cloak, a white beard over their face, and a long trident used like a walking stick. The bucket quickly dropped down as the figure smiled down at the patriarch, with their crooked teeth revealed by their smile. "O Patriarch of Stromer, legacy of the Four Kingdoms, sword of Cipely, brander of 10,000 souls, king over all kings, hero of the people," the god of the sea said with a mocking bow, their fishtail bending in an odd way that made the bow even more sarcastic. "Except, why are you not in your palace? Who possesses your legacy? Where is your sword? Who has your brands? Where are the kings you rule? And who calls you a hero?" Olokun asked rhetorically to the patriarch, who pursed his lips before Olokun continued. "I guess that really doesn't make you anyone important. I would call you nobody, except nobody is a lot more memorable than you are. So why would I help you?" Olokun asked the patriarch, who thought for a moment before he answered. "You'll help me because I asked, for no other reason than it's the right thing to do, and because someone asked for help. Because that's what heroes do," the patriarch asked the god, who only chuckled in response. "That's what heroes do." "Is that what you do?" Olokun asked Mansa, who proudly nodded, despite being covered in blood, mud, and salt. Olokun chuckled to themselves or they asked themselves rhetorically, "What kind of fool watches the ocean retreat from the land and decides to run towards the sea?" "The kind of fool that will try to pull others out of the way of the waves," Mansa answered, and Olokun examined him closely for a moment. "You really do believe that? Well, all right, hero. If you want to use my water to wash off the blood from your body, all you have to do is prove you are a hero before the sun sets." Olokun said to Mansa, who asked, "How do you want me to prove that I am a hero?" he asked the god. "All you have to do is as you say. Help someone just because it's the right thing to do, and because they asked for help," they said to Mansa, who reached out their hand to shake the Earthshaker's hand. "I will do what you ask. I don't think it will be too hard," he told the god, who only chuckled. "You may find that the amount of effort you plan isn't the same amount of effort that it takes," Olokun said before they dissolved into sea water, leaving Mansa alone on the dock as he looked over the dock to see who needed his help. He tried asking the dock workers and sailors to see if they needed his help, only to be cursed away. The ones who didn't have collars around their necks cursed Mansa at least, The slaves only looked at him from the corner of their eyes while Mansa tried finding someone who needed help. The docks were busy, however, they weren't willing to ask someone who reeked and who was covered in mud and unseen blood for their assistance. Mansa then tried a bit further from the docks to ask at the temple if they needed help with anything, only for them to threaten him if he did not leave. So he left in a huff. He knew Fletcher was in charge of the temple, but he never paid close attention to how the temple was run. So now he was certain when things were made right, he would have to examine how his temples are run. He did not notice anything wrong by thinking of the temples built to the gods as his temples. They were his temples, just as Stromer was his continent, just as Cipoli was his city, just as the Stromerians were his people, just as his gold was his wealth. With Kanich directly overhead, Mansa rested near the old shrine to Olokun. There was nowhere else he could stand without being stared at. Somehow he felt even more exposed here in the western quarter than he was in the eastern quarter. There, nearly everyone was homeless and struggling, so you were just one among many. Here in the docks and the harbor, everything was busy and bustling. If you were standing around doing nothing, you were either in someone's way or you were a threat. Sitting by the shrine, Mansa felt an old hand resting on his shoulder. Find anyone to help? Olokun asked. No, no one needs my help, Mansa said to the old god, who only laughed. Do you really believe no one here needs help? Part of being human means you need help. You build communities, you protect one another, and you willingly lie down your lives and dignity for others. For goodness sakes, the first action a human does when they are born is cry, as a way of reaching out to the community. Infants will even cry when they hear another baby crying to help others be heard. Even before you have conscious thought, humans ask for help and humans respond with help. So, do you want to rephrase your answer? They asked Mansa. Okay, so no one is willing to tell me they want help. I ask and they either say no or they threaten me. They see me as a vagrant and a madman. So they don't see me as being helpful. They either think I am desperate for work or they think I'm going to cause trouble. So they refuse to have me help. It's even harder than working in the Eastern Quarter. The work was hard, but I didn't have to keep begging Ogun for the indignity of carrying the iron, Mansa said as Olokun chuckled. Ah yes, how cruel is it to beg for indignity and they don't even give you that? I couldn't relate at all, they said slyly as Mansa sighed. Look, don't be a cryptic asshole. If you want to say a parable or prove a point, just do it. I've been through too much today and try to ask, oh, what do you mean by that, oh wise and powerful Olokun? Mansa said, as it was Olokun's turn to sigh. Uh, sure. Just take all the fun out of it, don't you? Look down there. See the boy in a collar, collecting empty pallets for the stevedores? Olokun said, pointing down by the sea, and Mansa took a moment, and he could see the boy, and when he focused on the boy, who could not be older than 5 years old, Olokun continued his point. His name is Lift. His parents were both captured warriors from Cope. They were from enemy tribes, brought to a strange land, conquered property of General Twist and the Patriarch. They found small comfort in each other by being from the same place and being in the same situation. When Lift's mother was pregnant, she was separated from her husband. Neither of them know where the other is at. Her son was born into slavery, and now he works in the docks, and this is the only life he knows. He has never known copish soil. He has never sung the songs, never tasted the food, never heard the stories, never run and under those skies. He was born a slave, and the only thing he has to look forward to is being free in 2 years. Assuming your bloodthirsty bride doesn't rewrite the laws. He has no memories of Cope because he has never lived there. He only has dim memories of his mother, who was freed 2 years ago, only to lose her son, being sold to another master. She still is looking for her husband and her son. She may be a free woman, but she isn't a citizen of Stromer, and it holds her back. She prostitutes herself in graveyards, under the viaduct, to the filthy masses of the city. And even then, just by being a former slave, she isn't allowed the indignity of working in bordellos. She isn't allowed the indignity of a madam. She isn't allowed the indignity of having her services taxed. And she goes through all of that in a desperate hope to find her enslaved son and her lost husband. What is your point? Imagine a world that breaks you down so much that even indignity is too much for them to give to you. Imagine suffering so much that even the dream of freedom may never come to you. Imagine never knowing your father. Imagine your mother is less than a distant memory. Imagine never knowing your family. Imagine never knowing where you come from. Imagine the only future you know is suffering. Imagine all you have is work, lash, and pain, having to beg for indignities that others never would have taken for free. That is what my sea represents for your citizens, and what it represents for your slaves. To your slaves, the ocean is a prison, a reminder of a home they can never return to. Even if they are freed, they can never make it back to Cope. For most of them, their homes and families were destroyed by your forces, leaving them only rubble and ash to return to. For other, they were taken so young, Cope is barely a distant memory, and they wouldn't know where to start. And then there are those who are born in Stromer. This is the only home they have ever known. And what does that have to do about begging for indignity? You've been to the Eastern Quarter. You have seen these soldiers you left behind. People who were loyal to you, and now they have nothing now. However, they still have the indignity of being able to say that Stromer is their home. They have the indignity of calling you their patriarch. Hey! Hey, that boy down there cannot call you his patriarch because you don't speak for him. You don't seek to protect him. He doesn't even get the indignity of having a promise broken. If he gets freedom, he will get to live on the streets, probably targeted by the homeless of your city, exploited and broken even further. If you asked him for a hero, do you think he would want one? He's never had a hero, though. He may not even know how to ask for one. He didn't even have the indignity of having a hero fail him. Precisely, Patriarch. Now ask yourself, is he also not your people? He was born here. He works for your empire. He serves you. Is he not your people? What of the free men of Cope? They fought, they lost, they were captured, and they were enslaved. For 7 years. Now to have freedom without a home. Are they also not your people? Or are they all not your people? Are they unworthy of a hero like you? Why tell me this? Because, silly little man, when you're a god of something as impressive as the sea, you are the god of all of the sea, from the smallest plankton to the mightiest wave, from the kelp forest to the dark abyss, from those that reside under the ocean to those that skim over the top and those who fly over the ocean. You have to fight for those who are eaten and those who eat. You have to represent them all. Even if it breaks your heart, even if it seems impossible to be there for it all, no matter how mighty or how meek, I am God to them all. You are a patriarch to a continent. So if you want to be a patriarch who is a hero, that means you need to be a hero to them all, not merely to the people who support you, not just to the wealthy who fund you, not even just to the citizens and soldiers. You have to be the patriarch to them all. You are the patriarch to the slave and the freeman, to the plebeians and the patricians, to the forests and the seas. Now, if you see yourself as patriarch of them all, do you think you're a good patriarch to them? Olokun asked, only for Mansa to stare at the boy before he answered. No. There you go. Now follow me. We need to wash the blood off your skin, the god of the sea said as they slithered towards the beach. Wait, but I didn't do what you said, Mansa said, only for Olokun to chuckle. I asked you to prove yourself a hero. You just did by admitting you were wrong. I am sure you will do better. You changed inside yourself. And just like how the quantity of oxygen in the ocean can change the entire ecosystem, you too have changed your ecosystem. Olokun said as they made it to the surf and the water splashed on Mansa, wiping his blood away. In just a few minutes, the blood was washed away, leaving only Mansa's scars. Some he remembered, most he did not. What do I do now? How do I get my identity back? He asked, only for Olokun to shrug and point back to Saipali. I'm sure you can find Ocean in the northern quarter. She tends to help people find their way past their scars. Do be aware, little hero. The sea has a long memory, and I tend to get revenge on any who dare not show me respect. Anger me, and the best you can hope for is anger that burns bright, hot, and quick. My anger also burns cold, so cold that ships cannot cross, where the fish are kept from your shores and where your prosperity becomes a prison. I can bring raiders to your shores, and I can smash your hopes upon the rocks. I can starve your people with cloudy skies that never rain. I can freeze your soil at night with hail, and during the day I can dry your soil to sand. Your entire continent can be reduced to wasteland where nothing can grow, all at my whim. So remember, Patriarch, you are not merely a hero to one people. You need to be a hero to all people. Be a hero to the citizens and slaves. Be a hero to those who support and oppose you. If you are going to be patriarch, you need to be one to everyone, not just those who worship you. Just as I am the god to all of the sea, not merely God to the men who pay to enter my temple.